Welcome to The Road to Zero, a future-proof podcast, as we explore the changing nature of our economy as we look for prosperity and opportunity in not only preserving but also improving our environment. Today on The Road to Zero, we have Clive Fleming of Reclaim PV Recycling joining us today from South Australia.
G'day. How's it going?
Very good. Glad to have you here. So tell me, how did you get into the recycling game for solar panels?
Yes, well, this started off a few years ago. Probably in 2013 was the first mention of it, I guess, in our circle of business. So we were in a recycling and a maintenance business where we were looking at systems and looking at the faults. And we got a job one day to remove about 600 solar panels from one retirement village. So at the end of this job, took about 3 months. We started putting the panels in this sort of compound on site. And at the end of that, they sort of said, the company that employed us to do this job said, just put them in a huge skip and take them to the dump. And of course, we decided that was probably not the way we wanted to do it. So we thought an opportunity was here to look at what was being done with these panels around the world and what was, what the potential for the future was and where it was going. So we did a lot of research on that. And that's where it started. Yeah, from that point, that was 2014, we started Reclaim PV. It was one of those quick decisions that had to be made, and we did it. So yeah, that's where it started.
Perfect. And give us an idea, like until that point, what happens to all those old panels? Because I hear that they last for 20, 30 years. And at that point, then people start getting rid of them. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, generally. I mean, the older panels you see that sort of started back in, let's say, the 80s or 90s, or let's say 90s or 2000s, they're still sort of going, a lot of them. A lot of those old BP panels or the Cymax, those sort of brands, they're very robust panels. And up to the point that we started, there was no knowledge, I don't think, around Australia at least, in other parts of the world that was available about solar panel recycling. So there was no real thought process that went into it, I don't think. In Europe, they were sort of already ahead of the game. They had been experiencing, early failures and natural failures, I guess, coming to the end of their life since about 2007. So we had the advantage of looking at what they were doing from that point and seeing, how they were handling it, what they were doing, and what we could do. So there was, it was a brand new thing, and it hadn't really been looked at prior to that, I don't think, in our region at least. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us, what do you do with an old solar panel?
Yeah, so we actually came up with a technique that was unique compared to what other companies were doing around the world. So it was a looking at the panel as a whole. So all the components within the panel, we decided to put it through a few tests to see where we could separate the panel. So we put it through a furnace, and that allows us to separate the glass from the cell, from all the contacts, and we remove the frame and the junction box prior to this. So it really allows us to separate the whole panel, and we've got further processes then to extract silver, and another process then to recover the silicon from the wafer itself, which is made up of silicon, other minerals, as well as aluminium. So yeah, so there's a process of separation through pyrolysis, which is a heat process. Yeah, thermal.
Okay, so you split it up in all its various components, and then how much of all this stuff is salvageable and usable afterwards?
Yeah, approximately about 98%. It's hard to sort of quantify because the glues, they don't make up much of the panel. So we've got the EVA, which is the ethylene vinyl acetate, which is the part between the glass and the cell. It's a compound that once it sort of sets, it's set, and it's a compound that's used in lots of different applications. Then we've got the backsheet, which is a polyvinyl fluoride, which is it's a material that's used in lots of different applications. But through our process, we burn that off, and it goes through an afterburner. That may change in time, and I think there's opportunities to then capture some carbons from that to use in other materials, say cement and things like that. But at the moment, so all the materials that we recover is everything except for those glues. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's pretty impressive. And how long did it take you to develop this entire process? I imagine it wasn't an overnight thing. Sounds like there was a lot of research and development put into it.
Yeah, there was. We did a lot of R&D with a local university here, Flinders University in Adelaide. And while that was happening, I mean, they were looking at laser techniques, which was exciting because I love lasers, but it didn't work. They looked at also some chemical processes, so the organic and some synthetic chemicals, and some other things to sort of speed up the degradation of the panel in order to recover or separate. But during that time, I think we looked at what they were doing, and it took a few months for them to go through different elements. Obviously, they've got their own projects on the go as well, so it wasn't sort of quick. During that time, though, through impatience maybe and also curiosity, we went off and did our own research and development. So internally, we came up with an idea that was, it was looking at all the different elements of the panel and what each property of each element was. And through that, we went over to another state in Victoria. We went to Victoria and we looked at a furnace there, and we thought, let's just try this out. Let's get this temperature right and ramp up to that, and then ramp down over a certain period of time. And we did that, and it actually opened the furnace and it worked. And we're like, wow, this is awesome. So that's what we went with. And at the time, nobody was doing that particular technique, so we felt we were onto something. Yeah.
How does it compare what everybody else is doing, would you say?
Well, there's not a lot of people doing, first of all, recycling of panels. There are obviously a lot of people relatively doing it, but it's in terms of the information that's available for what the processes are. There's the ones that I know about is, a shredding process that the panels go through, and then there's a thermal pyrolysis process or a furnace, and then following that there's a separation and a wash, and it's quite an elaborate setup. So we did look at that at the beginning, and it was a couple of $1 million to set that up, and the feedstock would need to have be quite significant in order to sort of fund that. So we didn't go that way. The other techniques I've seen is particularly in Asia, where they've put a sort of a blade on a conveyor belt, let's say, and the panel comes past and it sort of cuts the top part of the panel off, and then it rolls onto a ball. So we didn't do that either. So there's not a lot of different techniques out there. There's a few different ones like those ones I've mentioned. There's probably more, but I did read an article from an Indian university, I think late last year, where they did some experimenting. They worked out a technique which was actually the same as ours, and they said that was the best technique to go with. So following that article, I think it sort of, gave us the confidence to go, yeah, awesome, we're on the right track for sure. So yeah, it just comes down to innovation, I think, and really trying to find ways that work. And I think our technique is quite modular. So we have got a furnace that sort of has capacity for about 70,000 panels per year. And it's relatively low cost. And if the feedstock increases twice in a year, we just need to put another furnace on site or find another site. So we're keeping in line with the feedstock, which is, trying to be efficient in that way.
And then just to get a good perspective, so the stuff comes in, you get the glass, and just get an idea of, so it sounds like a lot of it's metal recycling, so it can go right back into as a source metal. And what happens to the glass? Is it broken down, melted down, reused, or how is it recycled?
Yeah, so the glass and the metal, they get broken during the process. They don't melt. They don't reach that point of heat. So that's one of the things we made sure that we wanted to avoid. So we've got that glass that's actually, it's really high quality glass. So we've got the ability to put that into manufacturing locally where we can. In Australia, there's actually a ban now on exporting glass, I believe, in most cases. So we have got agreements for offtake with the glass in Australia. The aluminium is the same. So that comes through in whole pieces, the frames as they are in that shape and form. So there's an opportunity then to bale that aluminium and provide that locally as well. So really keeping those materials in the country. When they're all in whole pieces. So it's really a sorting phase that comes after the furnace. That's just a case of making sure the glass goes into the glass bin and it's washed, and also then the aluminium goes into the aluminium bins, and all the other materials such as the contacts in between the cells, and also the cables, the copper cables. So all those have their own particular bins.
Pretty much at that point, it's separate. It's just a sort job, and it goes into an already existing process to use these materials.
Yeah, exactly. So it goes in with virgin, say for the glass, it'll go in with virgin material, and it might be half, and that will obviously reduce their demand for sourcing virgin material, as well as reducing the energy they require overall.
And then just to get an idea of the cost model you have, so now, so imagine there's a recuperation of materials at the other end. So what does it cost to recycle a solar panel? And I imagine there's a fee to provide. You charge for people delivering panels, and you make some money on the other end. I take it.
Yeah, for sure. So we charge for first of all our freight wherever the panels are to get them to us, and that's something that will change over time with our network as that grows, and we have more participation from industry as well as other business. We can start to optimize the collection side of things to make that reduce those costs. The other side of it was we have to charge a recycling fee at the moment because our overheads are quite they're relatively high versus the materials we're recovering for sale. So we can't really, we're not going out and buying new equipment all the time. We are really just running it as we need to. So we need to charge a fee for recycling as well. So those two components, they will change as we, as the feedstock increases, the amount of panels we recover increases over the next couple of years. We'll start to see a reduction in that recycling fee where we can sort of start to attain some value from the materials. And the freight will change as well. So there's a few changes, but at the moment we do charge for those two things separately, and they all come through as one cost. But it's actually reduced over time. I mean, our fee was before, I think it was $30 a panel. That was just our blanket fee, but that's changed now. It's significantly cheaper. In some cases, half that cost. So
Okay, so it'll decrease over time. And I guess right now the model, I guess, is whoever's getting rid of them. That's a cost they have to factor in when they're putting these things together. A couple decades down the road.
Yeah, ideally they should be. I mean, developers that are doing these huge solar farms. The question has started to come out more and more about what they do in terms of the cost at decommissioning stage, and that's good. Those conversations are starting. It seems a little bit late to have that thought, but it's happening now, which is good. And also the installers that are sort of, let's say they're doing an upgrade for a system that might be 10 years old. They're putting batteries on now, and the homeowner has 6 to 8 panels they want to take off. There needs to be a cost.
The interesting thing here are these solar panels, and it's really a very similar mirror issue that we're having with the oil and gas industry, where you make these wells, and then come at the end, there's a whole cost to decommission them. I know we're dealing with that right now in Western Canada and Alberta and some places in BC, and even the prairies, because some of these wells at end of life, and then the companies kind of disappear, and then the landowner is stuck with this well, and who's factored this cost in. And it's interesting how these panels have a very similar issue, maybe not as costly or complex, but there's still this, and it's a great time as we're like building up such massive amounts of solar panels to start figuring out, oh yeah, there's a cost at the end. And I imagine it'll probably get cheaper over time. But it's really funny how it's a very similar issue we've seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a common thing. We have got the opportunity to get ahead of it by thinking as much as we can about it and sharing that knowledge, and really brainstorming and working together. And it's not just obviously solar panels. It's like you said, it's the oil and gas industry, and it seems it has taken such a long time to sort of to learn that we need to start thinking about those things before or during the time of build. But it's really common that happens a lot, that we sort of, it's an afterthought. But I think the positive side of that is that we have the opportunity to look at other countries and other regions in the world, like say Africa and other places that are starting to develop more, and learn that we start introducing that conversation now into those countries where they won't be faced with the same issues as we are sort of facing now as more developed countries, I think, in that area. So yeah, there's a positive to it.
Yeah, there is. And then what's next for you and your company? So now you're in Southern Australia. Are you looking at growing other plants, or is this plant going to serve all of Australia? What's the world empire plan for your company?
World domination? No, maybe, but yeah, we've got another plant in Brisbane as well. So Adelaide's been announced, but we've also got the same sort of set up in Brisbane in Queensland, and that's taking all the modules, all the panels from northern New South Wales and the whole of Queensland into recycling. And the next, I think, step for us is to look at another plant further up north in Queensland, because there's a huge distance to travel there. It's really about learning about where the feedstock is and bringing the awareness so that these panels do come out of the woodwork, whether that's coming off the roof or out of a workshop somewhere, because there's thousands of them just lying around. And making that awareness, so then we can start to see, okay, there's another opportunity to put a plant here. So that's the plan around Australia, to have localized. I mean, the idea is to keep those materials in each state, so we can sort of support that each small government's goals in terms of their industrial growth or their job creation in those states. So by supplying materials locally where we can to support that, but then also looking at battery recycling as well. We've started to look at that and introduce that into our our weekly meetings, and start to look at how we can position recycling of batteries into the whole mix, and when we start doing that. That's another thing that we need to get going, because it's the sooner we do that stuff as well, the better it is for the future.
Well, I guess imagine too, is not only from your panel arrays. I mean, you're going to have electric vehicles all over the place, electric transportation, and power walls. So there's a lot more batteries going to be showing up in our lives very shortly.
Yeah, they're going to be everywhere. I think all these. There's a lot of materials, a lot of good materials in them, and I think it's a better product if it's definitely got an end of life plan and it's recyclable, and those materials are going straight back into those products. And also, I think the important thing with recycling is to use the information or the data that's been collected through the process and through logistics and through other information about why they're failing and things like that, and make the product better, make the industry as a whole better in terms of sourcing better products for the actual supply of the materials, so that when they come to recycling, they're easier to recycle, they're better for the environment, I guess, and there's less failures, because there's the cause, I think, of our business needing to be available now is that a lot of these panels, like you said at the beginning, they've got a 25, 30-year warranty, let's say 25 years. But if you go by the warranty, I mean, it looks like the next, they won't be coming off for recycling in 2030, 2035. But that's not the case. I think a lot of the rushed installations back in the 10 years ago, there was a huge, in Australia at least, probably other regions as well, there was a huge demand for panels because it was rebates and there was a real push for it. A lot of businesses sort of came out of nowhere and started selling them, and a lot of manufacturers have come and gone since then. So there was material shortages in China, so that some manufacturers had to source different companies to buy the materials from, and that sort of has led to, in different areas, product failures, and obviously the variants of regulation that have sort of started and changed since like 10 years ago. It's huge. So the standards now are different than they were in 2010, 2012. So the panels that are coming in are better in terms of the quality and the testing and all those things. But that back then, it was sort of like, anything could sort of be shipped in here, and it wasn't always the best. So we're starting to see those ones come off a lot. There's lots of different varying factors, that as well as the installation standards, who was installing them, how they were doing it. I remember seeing a video once from a manufacturer advertising their panels, and they had a motorbike, a dirt bike, riding across the panels. They were showing how tough they were. And that's just ridiculous, because that's not what you want to be doing, because that just creates micro cracks and those things. You don't see them with your eye, but then 5 years later they start to show up and you've got failures. So it's a little bit irresponsible to do that, but that's just people wanted to know that their panels were tough. Not great.
Well, great. Glad to see someone's taking this problem head on and showing some leadership. What you'd like to see coming out of the industry?
Not entirely. I think the participation from all industry, from all levels of not just industry but community. I think in general, homeowners are really, really adaptive to this sort of stuff. They really do care, and the push for the environment it's changing. I think it's changing quickly, and there's a lot of attention on recycling generally around the world. I think it's not just here; it's everywhere, and I think a lot of innovation will come from that. I think people have ideas all the time, and I think it's really important to bring those ideas forward, even if it seems it's not going to work just now. I think it's really important to have those conversations and bring ideas forward and share it with everyone else.
And what I hear too is that really big question of What happens to this when its life is over and something that gets overlooked often?
Yeah, it does. It's one of those questions, isn't it? It's There's lots of things that, I mean, if you look at a landfill site, I didn't realize the volume of what goes into landfill until I sort of went to one and saw it, and I got information about what was going into it every month. And it's you forget how big the world is sometimes. You forget how much space we've got around us, and then you sort of, if you don't look at where your rubbish goes, or this plastic thing here or this bit of whatever it is, you don't realize the path that it's going to, until you start looking at it, and then you go, oh, like, wow, that's all going to that landfill over there, and it's a huge amount, and it's a massive resource that we're just really just pushing over there because no one wants to deal with it. But if we look at the opportunities to process those materials and where we can use them, we can avoid that landfill first of all, and then we can also avoid producing new materials out of mined or other processes of virgin materials. So yeah, I think there is so many. I really believe that every material that we've created out of oils and other metals, it can all be recycled. It can all be reused in some level. It just has to have the research behind it, and we've got all the resources around us that we can just utilize. Yeah, we don't have to make everything new all the time. Yeah, opportunities, materials.
Yeah, well, there are, and I hear there's a huge industry to build to support that, right? Like lots of jobs and lots of development, so a lot of economic opportunity that's just really there to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. There is. It's like the second round of the first round. We've got those same opportunities we had when the materials were raw, to create new ones and make new products and make our products last longer. And I think there's a lot of research going on around the world as well, which is spurring the governments to sort of invest in different grants and different funding, different opportunities, and looking at things a little bit differently. And also effectively, it's reducing some of the international freight in some areas where the circular economy really should be about looking at the local, whether it's a state thing or a city thing, or even a country thing, looking at those local materials and what's being imported and what's being used and what's being decommissioned, and what those materials equate to and where we can use them. Having those insights is, yeah, that's happening more and more, I think. So yeah, it's creating jobs, it's creating new products as well. It's making old products better. Like an example would be, say, pallets. It's like an old school way of making them was out of wood, and we're now making them out of plastic, recycled plastic, which is awesome. And there's still not 100% of the the pallets that are made out of plastic. A lot of them are still made out of wood, even though that technology is there and it's usable and they last longer. It just has to takes time to change those things, but they're all changing, I think, slowly.
Yeah. Well, it's nice. You're really seeing an awareness growing and really things moving a lot faster than they have in the past, which is really great to see.
Yeah, for sure. Things are changing. It's a good time to be alive. My kids talk to me about my job. The younger generation these days, I mean, it's like a lot of things that have changed since like the 70s, 80s, whatever. It's those things that we've experienced firsthand. Whether it's social or environmental, all those changes that we're living in now. My children are 7 and 8, and their way of life and their way of seeing things is really about reuse, and it's ingrained in them already. It's not They don't have to sort of convert their thinking. It's they get the opportunity then in the next 10 years to change, to evolve even more. So I think it's a generational thing. We've reached that point where the kids now, it's not a question of yeah, do we recycle? It's how do we do this? So that's good to see as well. My kids always ask me about my job. They don't really know exactly what happens, but they know that there's solar panels that get recycled, and that's awesome. That's something you wouldn't have heard of with a lot of things, I think 30, 40 years ago, on a large scale at least. So yeah.
No, it is. Well, like I said, before the mentality was just throw it in the dump and bury it. And so it's nice to see that we're breaking that cycle and creating a way where we're keeping those materials. So
By doing that, we actually then just start to see our environment in a different way as well, which then subconsciously, I guess, or consciously on a larger scale, it changes the way we treat our environment. So I think, yeah, just the act of recycling or seeing somebody else recycle has a flow-on effect that's it's bigger than just recycling. It changes things, all things. So yeah, it's a positive global movement for sure.
well, there's that piece of showing care for the world around you. So really acknowledge you for the really taking the effort and developing that, because I hear what it took of the research it took and the time, and it's great to see that you got it up on the ground and growing, and it really can't wait to hear more about what you create next.
And we'll continue to share with you. We'll probably touch base again.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again. Again, acknowledge you for the work you're doing, the effort, and thank you for being my guest.
No worries, Nick. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for getting in touch with me.
To hear more about our podcasts, showcase events, or the Futureproof Network, please visit us at www.futureproof-network.com.